Hello everybody, welcome back. This is section 5.3 and today we're talking about kite and trapezoid properties. So up until now we've basically been working with the definition of a kite, which you will recall is a quadrilateral with two pairs of consecutive congruent sides. And we can see the definition at play in the diagram here. There's one pair of consecutive congruent sides and there is the second pair of consecutive congruent sides. But today we're going to expand our understanding of a kite a little bit and talk about some other properties. So first, let's define the angles of a kite. You can see in the diagram the non-vertex angles are here and here. And the vertex angles are here and here. Next, we take a look at some properties that work with the kite. And the first one is that the non-vertex angles are always congruent. And remember, those non-vertex angles are here and here. So I'll mark those as being congruent to one another. The diagonals of a kite are perpendicular to one another. You can see in our diagram the diagonals are already drawn in there with the dotted lines, and now we know that they are perpendicular to one another. The vertex diagonal, which would be this diagonal because it connects the vertex angles, the vertex diagonal bisects the non-vertex diagonal. So what we know is that this segment is congruent to this segment. And then finally, the vertex angles are bisected by a diagonal. Well, the vertex angles, remember, are this angle and this angle. And so we now know that the vertex diagonal bisects those angles. So we have this angle congruent to this angle, and we have this angle congruent to this angle. Now, as you take notes at home, I encourage you to not just write down the properties, but also draw and label a diagram like I've done. All right, next we talk about a trapezoid. So up until now, again, we've basically been working with the definition of a trapezoid, a quadrilateral with one pair of parallel sides. You can see that definition is indicated here and here by our parallel lines symbols. And we're going to take a look at a couple more properties of a trapezoid. So first we're going to talk about the bases. The bases of the trapezoid are the parallel sides, and you can see it being indicated in the diagram. So this is one base and this is the other base. And we have two pairs of base angles. So they're indicated in the diagram as well. So here's one pair of base angles. And then we have the second pair of base angles here and here. And again, I encourage you to draw and label your own diagram in your notebook. So next, let's look at a couple more properties of a trapezoid. So the first bullet you see, it says consecutive angles between the bases are supplementary. Now, consecutive angles mean they're going to be the angles next to each other, right? And between the bases means that we're talking about this angle and this angle. Those are consecutive angles between our two bases, right? Remember, the bases are the parallel sides. And then we also have the second pair of consecutive angles between the bases, which are here and here. And what we now know is those pairs of angles are supplementary to one another, meaning they add up to 180 degrees. Now, if our trapezoid is an isosceles trapezoid, which means that the two non-parallel sides are congruent to one another, then we know our second bullet point, the base angles and diagonals of this isosceles trapezoid are congruent. So we know base angles, that angle would be congruent to that angle. That angle would be congruent to that angle. And our diagonals would be congruent to one another. So this diagonal would be congruent to this diagonal. Again, I encourage you to not just write down these properties, but to also draw a diagram and label it.